This presentation will focus on academic accommodations for students with disabilities. I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Joanna Ramsdenmeyer, Dean of Enrollment Management and ADA Coordinator from Allen College. I was able to integrate her personal experiences and perspective within this presentation, specifically when discussing the academic leader's role regarding this legal issue. Equity and access in higher education stand as fundamental pillars in fostering a fair and inclusive academic environment. However, persistent disparities based on disability and other factors continue to hinder the realization of true equity and access within higher education systems. To address these challenges, legal perspectives provide the foundational framework for understanding the rights and responsibilities of both educational institutions and students. These perspectives encompass a myriad of laws, regulations, and court decisions. The Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, of 1990 and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 prohibit discrimination against individuals with disabilities and require educational institutions to provide reasonable accommodations and modifications to ensure accessibility. These accommodations may include providing accessible facilities, auxiliary aids and services, and academic adjustments for students with disabilities. This may include providing sign language interpreters, extended time for exams, accessible course materials, and assistive technology. Passed in 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act is a landmark civil rights law that addresses discrimination based on disability. Through the ADA, disability is a recognized source of discrimination similar to race, color, religion, sex, or national origin within the Civil Rights Act of 1964. An individual with a disability is defined by the ADA as a person who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities, a person who has a history or record of such an impairment, or a person who is perceived by others as having such an impairment. The overarching goal of the ADA is to promote equal opportunity for Americans with disabilities. With the ADA in effect for almost 3 decades, there is a growing number of students with disabilities going to college. Estimates show that 19% of undergraduate students and 12% of graduate students have disabilities. Access to higher education is a vital part of the ADA's broader social promise to promote equal access and full participation in all aspects of U.S. society, especially considering that post-secondary education is often a prerequisite for many jobs in the U.S. Institutions of higher education are responsible for fulfilling the social and legal promise of disability rights laws. Students with disabilities face unique barriers to accessing and being included in higher education. Sometimes these barriers are programmatic, which means that they are related to the overall structure of academic programs and coursework. Other barriers may be structural, referring to aspects like documentation required to obtain accommodations and physical access to classrooms. Sometimes barriers may be more social, such as feelings of acceptance and inclusion. Both structural and social barriers act as deterrents for students. Transitioning from high school to college can be a barrier for students with disabilities. One issue is the noted disconnect between documentation requirements between the K through 12 and higher education systems. Some of these issues have been alleviated through the ADA Amendments Act passed in 2008, which reaffirms a broader definition of disability and supports other case law that prevents colleges from requiring overly burdensome documentation. Another issue is that responsibility for seeking out services and accessibility considerations falls onto students at the college level rather than on the school system. This shift in responsibility may be difficult for students with disabilities who exit high school without necessary self-advocacy skills or knowledge of their rights to obtain and maintain educational accommodations and support. To address this challenge, it is recommended that there is improved transition planning for students with disabilities that could include peer-to-peer mentoring programs, academic coaching, better understanding of accommodations, and collaboration between different programs across campuses. The makeup of services and strategies used to promote accessibility is another challenge for students. Research has noted two primary approaches for increasing or facilitating access to higher education for students with disabilities: the provision of accommodations to students and the use of universal design to structure campus environments, policies, and practices. Accommodation strategies are more commonly provided within higher education and are often completed by disability service offices. Accommodations are individualized and intended to respond to specific contexts and individual circumstances. The most common instructional accommodations in post-secondary education for students with learning disabilities include specialized tutoring, audiobooks, class note takers, preferential seating, and lecture notes or study guides to prepare for exams. Research has noted several barriers to the provision of accommodations. For example, many accommodations are based on physician recommendations and are often not evidence-based. Other barriers include a lack of faculty knowledge regarding federal regulations, reluctance in supporting students with disabilities, as well as perceived ethical implications of accommodations. The misperception of accommodations as special treatment rather than equal access is a common educational barrier for students. Universal design advocates for changes to the overall learning environment to increase access for everyone, including students with disabilities, rather than solely relying on individual accommodations. Current issues related to access include technology, such as assistive technology or distance learning, and increasing diversity within the disability population. Technology is increasingly looked to as a way to address various access barriers, but it also presents its own unique challenges. Online or distance learning can enhance accessibility for some students, but only 8.8% of faculty report receiving training in accommodations for students with disabilities, and 66.3% report having no knowledge of how to provide disability related accommodations in online classrooms. Technology can also be extremely advantageous for creating more accessible campus experiences. For example, assistive technology can help address print-related disabilities such as enlarging text, having text read aloud, or through dictation. The development of information and communication technologies has led to the acquisition of new digital tools at different educational levels. These technological advances are making it possible to address the educational needs of individuals more effectively through access to materials, curricular adaptations, and different learning paces. The implementation of electronic devices provides a number of opportunities, which includes providing equitable access, promoting equal opportunities, fostering independence and autonomy, as well as improving communication skills and the ability to function in society. There are other considerations for promoting full inclusion of disability in higher education. Disability inclusion should address instructional, physical, and social barriers. Social inclusion is often a missing component of the college experience, and students with disabilities report a lack of acceptance. This is important to note since having a sense of belonging is considered a predictor of student success. Another consideration is the increasing diversity within the disability community. In recent years, there are more students with autism, intellectual disabilities, and veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder on campus than there were in years immediately following the ADA's passage. As more people with disabilities receive services in K through 12, there will be more students with disabilities entering post-secondary institutions. To gain a personal perspective on the academic leader's role, I interviewed Dr. Joanna Ramstenmeyer, Dean of Enrollment Management at Allen College. She is the ADA coordinator for the college and the main point of contact for all students in need of accommodations. She explained that when a student would like to establish accommodations, the student is the one who initiates contact with her. Once that meeting occurs, she explained that she acts more of a liaison between the student, their physician, and the faculty to help ensure that appropriate accommodations are established and that faculty have the resources and means to apply those accommodations within their educational environment. Once accommodations are approved, the student is responsible for providing the approved academic accommodations form to each instructor each semester. If the student fails to provide that information to their instructor, then accommodations will not be provided to the student. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer will typically only meet with the student once to establish the necessary accommodations for the students, and then it's up to the student to follow up with her as they progress through the program if those accommodations need to be altered. If faculty need assistance with trying to determine how those accommodations can be integrated into their professional program, then Dr. Ramsdenmeyer may be more involved with the student and the program to help with problem solving and determining the best solution. Open communication amongst all parties involved has proven to provide the best outcome for each student. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer explained that the academic leader's role may be different at other institutions because each institution is able to create their own policy and process for addressing ADA concerns. The size of the institution will also play into how the ADA process is implemented. She explained that the University of Northern Iowa has a dedicated department that deals specifically with ADA concerns, and that is their only job. At UNI, their policy has them meeting with every student every semester to establish and revise accommodations as they progress from semester to semester. This is obviously different from Allen College, given that Dr. Ramsdenmeyer will only meet with the student at the start of the ADA process and will not typically meet with the student again unless the student initiates changes. The student has a lot of responsibility when it comes to establishing accommodations at the college level. At Allen College, the student is responsible for obtaining and submitting a clinical diagnosis of disability by title and code from an appropriate medical professional. This medical professional could be a psychologist, psychiatrist, physician, or nurse practitioner. The documentation provided by the student must include the history of the disability, any past accommodations, interpretation of results of professionally recognized diagnostic testing, and recommendations for educational and testing accommodations appropriate for the diagnosed disability. The student also holds the responsibility of obtaining accommodation policies from the certifying board of their individual program. The physician's recommendations for accommodations will dictate what accommodations are approved for the student. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer does not hold the responsibility of determining what accommodations must be provided to the student, but she must determine if the accommodations recommended by their physician are reasonable. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer has been in her role for many years. At the start, there were 1 to 2 students each year that initiated accommodations with Allen College. Fast forward to now, and she deals with an average of 30 plus students each academic year who seek accommodations. She estimated that this averaged out to be about 10 to 12% of the student body. Of those 30 plus students, about 95% of those students have a disability that is associated with mental health, with anxiety being the most common. When I asked her how she manages so many students by herself, she confirmed that the ADA policy established by the college aids with the management and structure of the ADA process. Not all students who seek accommodations have had them before, and the college has specific steps that each student must complete in order for accommodations to be considered. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer commented that students with a physical disability will typically come into a higher educational setting having prior documentation already available that shows what accommodations they have needed in prior years. This is helpful for the student because they are then not required to jump through so many hoops with their physicians to get those accommodations approved. If a student comes to Allen College seeking accommodations, but they have not previously had accommodations implemented, then those students are required to meet with the Unity Point Health Employee Assistant Program, or EAP. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer stated that this is important because if a student is seeking accommodations due to anxiety or other mental health challenges, then EAP can provide support to ensure that the student doesn't need any additional resources or support outside of the classroom as well. Allen College also has a full-time student success coordinator that can provide support and resources to students throughout the ADA process as well as throughout their program. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer provided some examples of previous students who have needed accommodations due to disabilities. In general, the majority of the students seeking accommodations need additional time for exams or need a separate, quiet place to take their exams. One student was visually impaired and had been for their entire life. This student was not completely blind, but their impairment did make it difficult to complete their coursework in the same fashion as their peers. The advancements in assistive technology has made it easier for students to have access to screen readers or speech recognition software. With this specific student, Dr. Ramsdenmeyer said that they knew what they would benefit from and what they would not. With active communication between the student, the faculty, and Dr. Ramsdenmeyer, the group collectively was able to determine what assistive technology was necessary for the student to be successful. Another student had an auditory impairment, and there were just a few challenges that this student faced, specifically in the clinical environment. Assistive technology was also available to the student, but the student really struggled with using a stethoscope when providing direct patient care. The college and the student determined that utilizing a stethoscope with magnified hearing capabilities allowed the student to conduct direct patient care without the assistance of another person. To help with the additional cost that this specialized piece of equipment cost, the student was only required to pay the amount of a traditional stethoscope, and the college paid the remaining balance to ensure that the student would not have any additional financial burden. This type of compromise was deemed reasonable by the college and greatly appreciated by the student, since they are expected to cover the cost of some of their personal equipment that they use. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer also talked about a student who had Charcot-Marie tooth disease, or CMT. Individuals with CMT suffer lifelong progressive muscle weakness and atrophy of the arms and legs, progressive sensory loss, and it can also affect other parts of their body. This leads to problems with balance, walking, hand use, and other motor skills. I was not told which program the specific student was enrolled in, but there was a lot of collaboration that occurred between Dr. Ramsdenmeyer, the student, the faculty, and the program's accrediting agency. Healthcare is a very physical environment, so determining possible solutions for someone who cannot physically perform the necessary tasks involved thinking outside the box. Through this collaboration, the accrediting agency came, came up with the idea of the student using the assistance of another individual to aid with the tasks that they could not physically perform. It was determined that if the student could adequately verbalize to another person what needed to be done and could supervise that person while they completed the task on their behalf, providing clarification and confirmation through every step, then that would be considered appropriate through the eyes of the program's accreditor. This made me wonder if Dr. Ramsdenmeyer had ever encountered a student whose accommodations could not be met, and she said no. She said there is always usually a way. It just may take a little extra time, effort, and collaboration to come up with the best solution that will ensure student success. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer discussed a few ethical considerations that she takes very seriously, which includes fairness, academic integrity, confidentiality, and meeting the needs of every student. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer confirmed that the policies and processes that are established at Allen College are followed for every single student who initiates accommodations. She also reiterated that she does not subjectively decide which student will receive accommodations or what those accommodations should be. The student's licensed professional is the one providing documentation stating the accommodations that are recommended for the student. It is up to the faculty to then determine how those accommodations can be integrated into their specific program. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer has gotten comments from other students stating that they don't feel like it's fair that some students get special treatment because they feel like they are being given an advantage over them. With every complaint or concern that hits her desk, she communicates with the college's legal team to ensure that an ethical violation has not occurred. She stated that every conversation ends the same each time. As long as she is following the policy and has adequate documentation to support the approval and implementation of the accommodations, then there is no need to be concerned. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer has also had some faculty reach out to her because they disagree with the accommodations that they are being asked to integrate into their program. She said she just politely has to remind them that this is a law and failure to provide the reasonable accommodations could end up in a lawsuit. The federal law is not a request, it is a requirement, and it is just something that all faculty have to address and abide by. There is a common misconception that accommodations are a form of cheating or that they allow students to gain an unfair advantage. Instructors' lack of knowledge and skills may contribute to these misconceptions about the connection between academic integrity and the learning needs of students. Having a student with accommodations does not mean that the instructor needs to assess that student with a lower standard. Accommodations should help facilitate learning and allow students to demonstrate their knowledge and abilities. There are different pathways that can be taken that will all lead to the same overall student outcome. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer provided a great example about a nursing student who needed additional time when distributing medication. The faculty came back to her stating that this was not a reasonable request. Through discussions, Dr. Ramsdenmeyer asked if the speed of which a student completed the task was the priority, or if the accuracy and completion of the task was the main focus. It was deemed that the speed of which the task was completed was not deemed an issue. So accommodating this reasonable request would be allowed and implemented by the faculty. As someone who works with students who needs accommodations, it's really important to establish open communication with all parties so that expectations can be clarified and reasons can be understood. Confidentiality is always a priority within educational and healthcare environments. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, ensures the confidentiality of students within an educational setting. Health records of adult students is classified as educational records that are included within FERPA regulations. Because of these regulations, Dr. Ramsdenmeyer stated that she is not allowed to share the student's accommodations or accompanied documentation with anyone else. The student holds that responsibility. When accommodations are approved, the student is expected to provide the signed academic accommodations form to every instructor every semester if they wish for those accommodations to be provided. If the faculty member contacts Dr. Ramsdenmeyer asking for additional information about the student's disability, the student is protected in that Dr. Ramsdenmeyer is not authorized to provide those medical records to the faculty. If faculty want to know more detailed information to help integrate the accommodations for the students, then they are required to discuss that with the student directly. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer also confirmed that she does not speak with any parent without the student being present. There are students with disabilities that require accommodations to be tailored to their specific needs. Dr. Ramsdenmeyer also expressed how the student body overall is changing, and additional changes have been made on campus to positively impact the overall learning environment for all students. Some changes that have been made to the Allen College campus include earplugs in all classrooms, an updated website that will assist audio and visual impaired individuals with navigation, pods in the library that are equipped to assist those students who need a quiet, separate location for testing needs, and almost all technological software through Unity Point Health is designed to meet the needs of those who are audio or visually impaired. Because of these widespread integrations, some students are not needing to request individualized accommodations because the college has placed a focus on changing the overall learning environment to increase access for everyone. In terms of student diversity, students with disabilities constitute one of the largest minority groups. Students with disabilities face several obstacles, such as greater academic distress, lower social support, and less engagement on campus compared to their peers. This is why it's essential that educational systems have policies and processes in place to ensure that all students have equal opportunity. Research has shown that institutional support, academic, and social integration, particularly in the student's first year, can positively influence their learning and enhance overall student success. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope the information provided will benefit you and your educational learning environment.